This is an interview with Joe Vicars for the Small Town Montana Oral History Project for the Montana Historical Society. Mr. Vicars discusses his mother, Frances Vicars' work as a nurse in Roundup and her operation of a hospital, and he discusses his operation of the Vicars Drug Store and his work as mayor of Roundup. The date of the interview was October the 23rd, 1984. It was conducted at Mr. Vicars' home in Roundup. The interviewer is Laurie Mercier.
Yeah, well, I was born in Livingston, Montana. 1912, my father, up here's his picture up here, was an MD. My mother was an RN. And we had a ranch 5 miles south of Livingston at Carter's Bridge. And in July of 1918, my dad and a couple other cowboys, I guess you'd say, drove some cattle up around Prey, over the bridge at Prey, because Carter Bridge was washed out. And then that evening, they had been crossing back and forth with a boat there at Carter's Bridge, but that night, the boat hit a sunken girder and upset, and my dad and the other gentleman were drowned. So we left Livingston and went to Helena. My mother took a job with the St. Peter's Hospital, and she farmed us out to the State Children's Home because she didn't have, she couldn't take care of us. And so we were kind of privileged people there, though we were paying boarders there, roomers. And we were in Helena for 3 years. And then I had a problem, some kind of a throat problem, and I went to the Dr. Copenhagen, and he said I might have a tubercular throat, and we should go to a lower climate, a lower area. So about that time, my mother got an offer of a job at Carpenter Creek, which was a small coal mining town near Melstone. So she came down and left us in Helena for a few months and got straightened out. And she bought a little house in Roundup here, and she worked in Carpenter Creek, and she had a babysitter for us. After I think about 2 years, she decided she'd had enough of Carpenter Creek, so she came back to Roundup and took the job as a school nurse at the for Roundup and number 3. And so that was when I was in about, 4th grade, I guess. And she kept that job for, that was about 3 years. Then she and another lady decided to open a small hospital, so they leased a building was known as the Copeland House. It was originally built for a kind of a rooming and boarding house, and they renovated it, and it had about, 10 rooms, and there were some pretty large rooms, a couple of them. So they got all their equipment and opened their hospital in 1924. And we kids, I had two sisters, Evelyn and Imelda. Evelyn was a little 17 months younger than I, and Millie was 5 years younger. And they had built a parochial school and finished it in 1924, so we started the school over there and went through the 8th grade. And then Joe Rass, a friend of mine from the country, and I went to St. John's down at Collegeville, Minnesota to go to high school. And I was there 2 years, and my mother decided that she was kind of tired of the hospital business, so she leased the place to Mamie Rahm, and she took a job in Idaho at the LDS hospital there as a superintendent. But she took Millie and Evie with her, but I was still down at Collegeville. So, but they didn't like it very well down in Idaho, so they moved back to Bozeman, which was really kind of like a hometown for my mother's family. They were all raised on the Madison, where my grandfather had homesteaded, and so we went back. When I came home from Collegeville, why, I just came back to Bozeman there, and we went to Rosary School there, they called it, for 2 years. And Mother was doing private nursing, and we were all living together again, so everybody was pretty happy about that. So she, then after I graduated, I went to the college, and about this time, well, let's see, I was there about 3.5 years, and Mr. Thompson had acquired the hospital here. He couldn't seem to get anybody to run it profitably, so he came to Bozeman and talked Mother into taking it over again. So back we came to Roundup. We've been here ever since.
So, do you remember what year that was?
That was in 1935.
Let me just back up a minute and ask you a couple of things. What was your mother's name?
My mother's name was Frances. Her maiden name, you mean? Or just?
Well, maybe her maiden name too.
Frances Bernard, B-A-R-N-A-R-D. See, my grandfather homesteaded on the Madison at Squaw Creek. And he also had a freight line between Virginia City and Belgrade, which was the main line then. And they had a hotel in Virginia City. This is my grandpa right there.
Well, do you remember much about the hospital when she first opened it up? You said something that had been known as the Copeland House?
Copeland House, yeah.
C-O-P-L-A-N-D?
Oh, C-O-P-E-L-A-N-D, yeah. In fact, one of the Copeland girls that was married to Newton still, I think she still lives out here. Her husband just died. Wes Newton just died 3 or 4 months ago. Newtons were a big name in this country. They had a couple of ranches, and they had a hardware store, and there was a whole family of them, and they were great cowboys, great riders. There's still some of them around. Walter Newton, one of the younger fellas. Of course, he's not so young now. He's 65 or something like that now, I suppose. But the hospital, yeah, we see then we had there were about 5 mines here then operating. In fact, Klein had about 700 men underground. It was a railroad mine. Of course, then they ran the engines with coal, you know. And then there was number 3, Roundup Coal Mining Company, and they had around 250 men underground. And there was Prescott, just south of the river here. They had 100 men. And then there was Jeffries, they had 50 men. And then there was some smaller mines out that had, you know, they'd have 5 or 10 guys working. So they were really in the coal business. And there was a lot of accidents, and they had each mine had a doctor, what they called a mine doctor, and he was on call all the time for that particular mine. And they had a check. They paid him with a check off, you know, from their pay. Why they'd pay $1, $2 or per man, and he furnished them with their medical attention. And we had some really very good doctors here. We had an old ex-army doctor by the name of Alexander. In fact, his sons are operating this grand bar down here now. Or is it his grandson? I think it's his sons. Yeah, sons, I'm sure. And he was quite a fella. He could take your appendix out in 15 minutes, and just slick as a whistle. And one time they had a place up at Klein called Dead Man's Coulee, and it was a notorious place for bootleggers and goings on there. And they had a little fight in there one night, and a blind fella, sliced another fella with a knife across the stomach, and all his intestines fell out. Doctor brought him down, put him on the operating table, washed him off with salt water, poked him back in, sewed him up. The guy got okay. Yeah, there were some great things go on there.
And you said that your mother, when she first came here, was school nurse.
Yeah.
At number 3.
Well, that's number 3 is just a mile out there, and we had a schoolhouse there, a big schoolhouse, and I can't believe it, but she used to walk out there a couple times a week to that, and it's went along about way by the road. It's long, probably about 3 miles, I suppose.
Well, it'd be great if I could talk to her today.
Oh yeah, she's
great stories.
She had some. Well, when she was younger, out and lived on the Madison, why, of course, the snow gets real deep there, and you know, gets up over the fence post. And they were sleigh riding, and she hit a post and got a fractured thigh, or in the hip joint it was really. And so she went. They took her to St. James in Butte. That's where she met my dad. And then after that, why, she went back to St. James and took training. And see, they were married in 1910, I think.
Well, did she ever talk much about, in later years, did she talk much about her experience as a school nurse at the number 3 at that camp? Did those children have any certain kinds of ailments or?
Well, yeah, they had a lot of earaches and problems like that, and skin problems. The sanitary facilities weren't that great. They'd have to, I think if you wanted a bath, you had to go to mine washout. And they did have skin problems with itch and that sort of thing. That was mostly the... And then they closed the number 3 school, and then the kids walked to town for years before they started busing them. And there were quite a few kids out there, of course, when the mine was operating.
Well, did she she ever talk about why she decided to start a hospital?
Well, she and another lady by the name of Kelly had a small hospital in Livingston. And I don't know, she was always orientated to helping people out, and there was really a big need for a hospital here. So she scrounged around and got going. In fact, it was rated the finest hospital, little hospital in the Northwest there. Yeah, we had 5 doctors, I guess, and an eye man, eye, ear, nose, and throat, and there were 3 or 4 dentists here then, and a chiropractor.
Did all 5 of the doctors practice at the hospital?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they'd, when they'd have surgery or something, they'd have one or the other would assist,
That's interesting because in some of these small towns in the state I've been in, it was pretty common for a doctor to start a hospital, and often there'd be competing hospitals within one town.
Oh yeah, yeah. Lots of doctors are strange people. They get to thinking they're God,
It sounds like your mother was able to work it out so that they all...
Oh boy, she whipped them into shape. She knew how to handle them. Yeah, there's always a conflict with doctors. I don't know what it is. Most of them don't get along, Like we have a condition here now that we have 2 doctors and they don't hit it off. They have to import somebody from Billings to help out.
And I was just reading in the Record Tribune about something that was going on in the 60s, I believe. Maybe some doctors had been threatened.
Oh yeah, we had somebody, I don't know what, he had a mad on for the doctor, Dr. Davis. They poured some kind of a flammable fluid in their clinic and set it on fire. It exploded. Nobody was hurt, but it did a lot of damage. And then, at that same time, I don't know whether it was the same person or persons or what. Anyway, they put a fuse, a dynamite fuse, in the doctor's gas tank. Scared him so bad he was gone in 2 days because he had a couple small kids and he left. Dr. Moylan, real nice guy.
Were either of those cases ever resolved?
They evidently weren't trying to harm the doctor. They just this fuse that was in the gas tank was a dud dummy. It was just there wasn't anything that would make it go off. But it scared him enough anyway. And then he said somebody came up to the emergency room with a baseball bat and was going to brain him or something. So he got out.
Well, do you remember what year it was? Oh, 1924 I have down here. That's when your mother opened the hospital.
Mm-hmm. We ran it for 25 years.
Well, what were some of the common ailments of the time, or what would bring people to a hospital back in the 1920s?
We had of course we had the industrial deals, the broken legs and broken arms and mine accidents, fairly often. And then the railroad was operating then too. There were some casualties there. And of course it's a big area here. People came from Winnett and Grass Range and Melstone and Rygate and all around. Cowboys were always used to have cowboys in those days. They'd get bucked off and hurt sometimes. Nobody'd get snake bit.
So it sounds like it was mostly job-related injuries.
Oh yeah, mostly. Yeah, we had 25 beds, and a lot of times they were full, especially in the winter time, you know. Then I remember my mother, they only charged $25 for a 10-day stay for a baby. Gosh, isn't that crazy? $25. And the Dr. O'Neill, he'd charge you $2 for an office call when a shot of penicillin. It's unreal. Unreal. But
Well, you were saying in the wintertime there'd be a lot of women, pregnant women in there?
oh yeah. Seems like that was the mostly most of the women had babies in the winter. Of course, they like to go to the hospital and get a rest for 10 days. Now they kick them out so fast they don't even hardly get in bed. Of course, they don't want to stay very long at the prices now.
Well, when you returned to Roundup in 1935, did it seem like the Depression had hit this town very hard?
Oh yeah, it was bad. Had the big drought too, you know. Had 10 years of drought here. And that ran from, well, let's see, when did that start? 19 to 20, around 26 or somewhere along in there. Because we lived on 3rd Street West over there, and those grain, they used to bring the grain in these sleighs, you know, with a wagon box on them. And that whole North Country was full of homesteaders. And oh boy, they were raising great wheat there. And they just 10 years they were all gone. They just dried out, and the banks went broke. And I remember Ma had $700 in the bank, and it went under. And I had the first $25 I ever made working on a dairy wagon went with the bank. But that whole North Country, Lake Mason, and just dried out. It's great wheat country when you get moisture, but if you don't have moisture, now this year's been a bad year. About 4 or 5 inches of rain, you know. You usually get around 12. And in a good year, you get 14. So, farming is a precarious occupation.
Well, so was this back in the 20s or the 30s that the farmers were having such a rough time?
Well, it started in the late 20s. I went back to St. John's in 28, so I missed a little bit of it, but it was starting already then. And then up through, well, 35, 36, it was pretty rough yet.
Well, when the banks closed in the 20s, I believe, early 20s, did that, you were pretty young at the time, but did that upset things in town much?
Oh yeah,
I'm sure it did you with your $25.
yeah, a lot of people lost money. And you know, in a town where people are working, you know, for a living, you know, just drawing wages, why, it really hurts to lose their savings. Because the way the mines worked, couldn't save very much. You know, they worked good in the winter, then they might lay off 3 months in the summer. And they had these company stores where they go and furnish them with groceries and clothes and so on, you know, all the necessities. And they charge it against the next winter. Well, heck, they might have to work all winter to pay the summer, for the summer. So there was a lot of impoverished people. But they, of course, when they got unionized and got the wages up, where some of those people making $30, $40 a day work under contract, those big stout guys, they could dig a lot of coal. And they was great for the automobile business and that sort of thing here. Some of them would buy a car, and before they got to Klein, they'd have it wrecked, and they'd come back and buy another one. It was unreal.
Well, maybe that's the answer to this question I was wondering why Roundup could support so many dealerships and garages over the years.
Oh yeah, that's why of course, we have a big trading area yet, and they're pretty competitive. Still have their Ford and General Motors and a GMC, but they used to have we had several others. We had a Chrysler Plymouth, and there were some of those other cars, that people have forgotten about. Star cars and Overlands. There was, I think there were about 4 or 5, maybe 6 dealerships here at one time. And then of course they had the farm implement dealers, and they were usually separate. But now they're consolidated, like with Muscle Valley Equipment. They have the General Motors, and then they have the International and New Holland and a couple of lines.
Well, you mentioned going to parochial school, and I didn't realize that Roundup had a parochial school.
Oh yeah, Father what's his name? Hennessy built it in 1924, and it ran. When did they close it? I don't even remember when they closed it. It ran must have ran for 25 years, I guess, anyway. Now it's converted, the building's converted to the museum there.
Well, were the classes very large, or was there a large Catholic population here?
Oh yeah, most all these people were Catholic people. Some of them didn't go to church, but they sent their kids to school. Yeah, I don't know how many kids they had. They had, let's see, had 8 grades. There must have been about 20 kids to a grade, I guess. Yeah. Of course, at that time they had a school at Klein too. Fairly large school.
Well, how did the kids from the parochial school and the kids from the public school get along? Was there much interaction?
No, not really. No, they're right across the street, but they didn't seem to have any problems. Although we did have a big Ku Klux Klan problem. They had this burning crosses and all that stuff, They wouldn't let the foreigners join because they weren't 100% Americans, They had, I forget, some other, what they call them. I don't recall the name. They had a different name for them, but they could join this other outfit. But, they ran real rampant here for about 10 years, I guess. But it finally simmered down until that's when the religious, deal was really antagonism there was the most. And even some of our big politicians and our doctors and fellas that belonged, but they, of course, the idea, most of those was just for the business thing, but pretty soon they found out that there was more people that didn't belong to it than did, so most of them dropped out. But one time somebody did try to burn the Catholic Church down, the old church. And then Jeffries was in between here and number 4. But you could dig coal here any place, you know. I saw a government survey one time that said there was 33,000 years coal in this field if they used it right along. Of course, the coal has been on the back burner here because it's too costly to mine. You know, you can't shaft mine. You can't compete with this open pit mining like they do over east. They just scrape the dirt off the top and there the coal is. Although we do have 2 small mines out here that are strip mines. But the overburden's about 80 feet, and that's too much. Klein had real good hard coal, but they went down 700 feet on a vertical shaft. All these other mines are what they call slope mines, you know, they just sloped in.
Well, when you were talking about the Ku Klux Klan, was that, you said it was pretty active for about 10 years. Would that have been in the 20s or later?
Yeah, it was mostly in the 20s, yeah.
And were they pretty visible?
Oh yeah, they put on their white outfits and burned crosses around. I was going to tell you about this one attorney, Charles Huffy was his name, and he was really outspoken and against them, you know. And somebody threw a rock through his window one night up there. And he lived over on 3rd Street. But yeah, it was strange how those things that get going and get people into them that you'd never believe, you know. But, oh yeah, they got a list and somebody got the list and stole it and made some copies, and boy, there was a lot of hurrahing around here then.
Did any of the people try to start a boycott against merchants who joined the Klan, or did it ever get down to that?
No, they never, well, the people weren't organized enough, you know, to really do anything effective against the Klan. So it just, you know, died of its own weight, I guess you'd say, after a while. Now they're reviving it again around the country, you know.
Well, after going away to college and in high school and in Bozeman for a while, when you returned to Roundup, had the town changed much?
Oh, really, I couldn't tell much. The only thing, I don't think they built a house here for, seems like 15 years. Just the last few years they've started, you know, people have needed places to live, so and a lot of people are retiring here because I think they find it, you know, quite inexpensive to live here. Although we don't have a lot of the amenities that, like Billings or some other places, but some people just want quiet and friendly people, and that's all they want for their later years.
Well, are you the founder of Vicars Drugstore?
Yeah, here. See, my dad had, let's see, 3 or 4 brothers. One of them was, or 2 of them were pharmacists, and they were in partnership They had a store in Billings, had one in Columbus, and had one in Livingston. And they, when in the early days, they had this Wiggenhorn bought the Billings store. I don't remember who bought the Columbus store, and then they just settled on the Livingston store because really that was their hometown. They were all raised on Shields River over at just over the hill from Livingston, about 12 miles. And they graduated from Park County High School. Let's see, maybe will this thing stretch? I think I could reach that.
Yeah, I can just call it.
Yeah. I was just going to show you that picture if I could locate it right handy here. This looks like a rat. And there's Lawrence there. There's one there, there. Yeah. Let's see, when was that? That was in
1898.
1898. That's getting kind of ancient, isn't it? Yeah. Somebody clipped that out of the Park County News and sent it to me. Yeah, well, they've had that. They had the store there in Livingston there for years and years. In fact, they just closed it 3 or 4 years ago. But it was kind of a landmark there. My father was the coroner for Park County for a while. At one time, he even practiced medicine up at Denton and down at Custer before he went over to, really got into the act, I'd say.
And what was your father's name?
Francis. Yeah, they're both, my mother's name Francis, my father's name Francis, which is kind of a little different maybe.
Well, how did, or why did you decide to go into the drugstore business?
Well, before I went to the Army, I was working at the drugstore here. I'd been, working in drugstores since about 1928 in the Livingston store, and when I went to college, I worked in the Bozeman Pharmacy in Bozeman. And before I went to the Army, I was working here in the drugstore for Mr. Blair Drugstore. And so when I went to the Army, they put me in charge of the pharmacy and the laboratory for 40th Station Hospital. And I was there 4 years. So I picked up a lot of experience there. We were overseas in Africa and Italy and Corsica for over 4 years. We had a big outfit. We had 1,200 bed expansion. And I used to go on detached service with, if they needed a guy that could run the lab and the pharmacy, I'd go like with the 15th Field or 28th General or wherever they needed somebody. And when we weren't busy. Yeah, we were in Africa for 14 months. Really had a great setup there at a town called Mustagnum. It was a fair size to 40,000 people, I guess. And they had a girls' college there, and we took over the girls' college. Boy, that wasn't great. We had marble tile tables, in the lab, gas, and it was really great. But you don't always find it that good. Most of the time you're in a tent. When we went to Corsica, of course we had these prefabs we could throw up. But
so you returned to Roundup after the war. Did many of your buddies from here return after the war, or did a lot of people leave?
Well, most of them came back here. Yeah. Because guys that left, had a guaranteed job. They couldn't can you. They'd have to give you a job back. And of course, that time the mines were still going good then. 1945. They didn't really peter out until 55.
So when you came back, did you go back to work for Blair's?
No, yeah, I did. I went back to work for a little while. Well, let's see now. Yeah, I did. I went back to work for Blair's, and oh yes, her nephew came from California, and he was a harem-scarum guy. He used to take money out of the till and go across the street and play the slot machine, tell how much money he won. I don't think, you don't beat those things very often. So finally I told her I couldn't keep track of the money, so I left, and then I bought the corner store where we are now. Both of those stores had been here since 1908, Blair's and this other store that we got.
It was called the Roundup Drug Company, is that
Yeah.
what it was?
Mm-hmm.
Well, did you make many changes in the operation after you bought it?
Oh, well, yeah, an old fella had it by the name of McKechnie, and he was quite a fella. He was an old pharmacist he originally came from New Brunswick or someplace in the Canadian provinces there over east. And he'd been in Lewistown, been an old-time druggist in Lewistown in the early days when Kendall and Brooks and those little mining towns around there were going booming, And then there was a fella in Lewistown by the name of Edwards, and he had a stationery store or some kind of a school supply store, called it Golden, Montana. Anyway, he and Mac bought this store here, and I guess they just rented it though, because I remember Mrs. Bennett said that her husband had bought it at a tax sale for $700. Anyway, all he cared for was to just make a living, In fact, I think he only bought $700 worth of stuff from McKesson merchandise in a year. And when we really turned that around, it was more like 70,000 pretty soon.
Well, what kinds of things had the store been selling, and then what changes were taking place at that time?
It was always a drugstore ever since 1908. There was a fella in there by the name of Oliver Shallow. He went more for jewelry though, and that sort of thing. But he worked for what they call the Kelly brothers, and they had a store in Forsyth, one here and one in Lewistown. They were identical. I mean, the fixtures and everything were just set up just alike. And but Oliver Shallow, he was quite a fella, but he was more interested in jewelry than he was in the drug business.
Well, the Blair's drugstore was still operating in
Yeah, we then her nephew got killed. They had on the 4th of July. We of course had this big celebration, every 4th, and he was mixing, well, he was going over to he lived just across the alley from the drugstore down there. And he took this siphon bottle. The old-fashioned ones, you know, were made with the glass, and then they had a wire mesh outside. And you put the CO2 bullet in there to charge it. And he went out the back door of the drugstore, and there was a step up, about this high. Well, when he stepped up on that, he turned that darn bottle up, and that bullet flew out of there and hit him right and killed him. Just like a 45 slug or something. So after that, why Miss Blair, she kind of, well, she was getting along anyway. She wanted to go to California and go back to Wisconsin, and so we bought it from her.
Were there any other drugstores in town?
Oh yeah, we had 3 stores at one time. We had Blair's and McKechnie and Graves, Dinsmore and Graves they called it, where the bull stations is now.
And there was enough trade for all 3.
Yeah, they seemed to all get by in a way.
Well, were there, did you cater to the mining trade at all? Were there certain drugs or
Oh yeah,
articles
most all your customers were miners, you know. They, oh yeah, they liked liniments and cough syrups, and a lot of them had to have trusses, you know, they'd get ruptured. I used to sell a lot of trusses. I don't know how they wore those things. They're so damned uncomfortable. With a steel spring in them, you know. And of course they all had hangovers, so they would always eat an aspirin and pain-killing things. Yeah, the prescription business wasn't that great because the doctors agreed to furnish the medications, you see, when they took the contract. So that way, why, they dished out green aspirin and red aspirin and blue aspirin. You know, they get the cheapest medication. But I guess
the mine doctors.
Yeah, the mine doctors. Mm-hmm.
Was that pretty common for other doctors too to give out their own medicine?
Not really. Most of them don't have time. A good busy doctor doesn't have time to monkey around giving out medicine. In fact, people like to get a prescription. They like to. They don't, when they dish them out something and hand it to them, they don't trust that. They don't like that at all. It's a strange thing. They'd rather go to the drugstore and get their medication.
Well, what is the role of the small town druggist? Do people come to you a lot and consult with you as if you were their doctor?
Oh yeah, the doctors have gotten so expensive, you know. It costs them $16 or so a call. Oh yeah, they come and in fact, I'm doing their Medicaid right now. $1,200 or $1,300 worth, maybe more. And I do the miners' books, miners for them, because they don't have the numbers, you know. You need this national drug code and so on, and a lot of them don't understand it anyway, you know. So I do that for them. And they've been hollering lately. They had a big strike, you know, and they didn't get it settled till just lately, and they didn't get any money for 2 or 3 months. But I think it's coming through now, I see.
Are these the retired miners?
Yeah, they're widows. The strange thing, all the miners are dead, but the widows are still here. So that's the way it is. Yeah, we have quite a few that are under that mine contract, you know, and they, of course, a lot of them don't have the card for the medications in the hospital, but a lot of them do too.
Well, when the mines started to shut down in the 50s, did that affect your business much?
Yeah, I think it did. The only thing was that we had one less drugstore, so you didn't really notice it that much. But when you lose, well, Klein alone, I think, had a $45,000 payroll every 2 weeks, cash money. I know the newspaper said that it didn't really affect you, but you can't lose that kind of money without noticing it. Somebody noticed it.
And what about your part of Main Street? Had that been a pretty busy area of town before?
Yeah, it's strange how the town moved. It moved from the railroad track right up Main. It just kept going. Now it's kept going right out this way.
What explains that?
Parking, I suppose, is the most critical reason. See, the Van Dyke's grocery used to be right down there in the Weir building. And I know parking was a critical thing for them, so they're way out there up on the end of Main Street now. In Picayunes, they had the model grocery here. And they had a grocery at Klein. That's where they really started from. And then the boys wanted to start, so they built this new supermarket over here.
Well, it would seem like that's one thing that has increased is maybe not the number of grocery stores, but maybe the volume of groceries.
Oh yeah, the number of grocery stores, there used to be several around, you know. There was one called the Boys, but that's down there where they just opened that new convenience store. There was the East Side Grocery. There was a building down below called the Mexicans. There was a guy that used to make them howl. He'd buy a carload of sugar, boy, and about give it away, and all these other guys would be going crazy. Yeah, Sawyer's was here. Safeway was here. Then there
was this guy? He was a Mexican, or he was called a Mexican?
No, he wasn't Mexican. He had a store at Gage down here. Do you know where Gage is? It's just a wide place in the road down here, about 7 miles. And people, of course he was non-union, but all these miners on Sunday, they'd be down there buying groceries like crazy. So he finally moved up here. Got that big green building down there on the way out of town on First Avenue. And boy, he really took him by the ear.
What was his place called?
What the heck was his name? Hernandez, I guess his name was. Yeah, Hernandez. I don't know I don't think they called it anything but the Mexican, so. But he was quite a merchant.
Well, when they started to pave the roads around here, I mean, you mentioned earlier that Roundup serves a pretty large area. With newer roads, did that increase business in the town?
Not really. The road to Billings was too good. They went to Billings. That's what they're still doing. That's our biggest problem is Billings. Because, you know, the smaller people can't buy in the quantities that Kmart and all those guys do. So you're at a big disadvantage. That's why they're always happy when the roads are slick and the snow is deep. Everybody has to stay home. Yep.
So even though Roundup is more than 50 miles, isn't it?
50, yeah, just about even.
That's not far enough.
No, not with the good roads now. They buzz down there in less than an hour, you know. Even if it costs $10 to drive down and back, why, you know, I don't know. There's really not that much of a saving. And the groceries, I think, here are just as reasonable as they are down there, probably.
Well, do you think most people in town are loyal to the local merchants, or do most people just not think about it?
Well, I don't know. When you get to have a matter of money, why, loyalty kind of goes out the window. Because, you know, it's money's kind of a scarce commodity. Well, I guess not scarce. There's plenty of it, but it doesn't buy very much. So they're shopping for their best deal they can get, which you can't blame them for either.
Well, how have the merchants here gotten along over the years in business?
Oh, I don't know. We've had a big turnover in merchants, so they're like we have a new flower shop owner. We got a new coast to coast Gambles owner. Got a new video store. Yeah, there's been quite a, I don't know, there's quite a few people wanting to move into the smaller towns, you know. They're getting away from that big rat race. They're trying to. We don't seem to have as much, you know, crime, or you can let your kid go to school or go to the show and doesn't, you know, nobody bothers them. It's not like those towns. Like, well, Billings is getting really bad.
So would you say that Roundup has been growing?
Well, it's been pretty static. Our population is only 2,100. In fact, at one time it was up to 2,800. But, you know, the camps around had quite a few people in too. But, of course, there's still people out there, you know. They're retired there. It's a reasonable place to live. And they have electricity, good wells, you know, septic tanks, and they're happy where they are. But the town, where they're building houses, but it really isn't growing that much. It isn't increasing in population. We have kind of a transient thing, you know, with the oil people. The seismograph come and they go, and then some of these other outfits, like oil well suppliers, you know, their fortunes go with how much oil they're finding. So it's I don't know. I think we're really, you know, have been sitting on the bottom, but I don't think it'd go down any farther than that, where we are right now. We still have our ranchers, you know, our little lumbering industry that we have. We got 2 or 3 mills, a couple fairly sized ones, and we have our hospital, which is probably our biggest employer, about 50 people, I think.
Well, I was wondering what kind of town Roundup became after it was for so long a mining community.
Well, it went to oil. Oil was big for right during Well, just at the start of the war, of course, they were out looking for oil every place. And they found it right here near town at this gauge I was telling you about, this gauge dome they call it. And it was shallow though, real shallow, and not much oil. But then they dug around, in seismograph, and they got a real good field out north there. The Texas company did. They call it the Jim Cooley Field. And then they went over east toward Melstone, and they got some good fields down there. So really, I guess backbone of our economy right now is in this oil thing. But one guy can pump 100 wells. It's when they're looking for it, that's when you have the people around. But once you get the oil, though, it's you have something there. It's tangible. It's a real good resource. And if you get enough wells, then you get enough people working too. It helps, and they pay good wages. So it's a big shot in the arm for the economy, all right.
Well, do you think the oil activity will keep on to support Roundup?
Oh yeah, now there's a couple seismograph crews right now in here, and there's oil around if they just get to the right place, I guess. See, the original oil well in the state of Montana was right here, just north here, at in the Devil's Basin there, on the edge of the basin. But it's a heavy oil. It's only good for like highway work, So they didn't stay with that very long. But now they're drilling deeper, and trying different stratas to see what they can find. And of course, there's Cat Creek over here. It's shallow, but they seem to keep going and going. I remember I rode over to Cat Creek in a little old Ford Bug in about 1923. It rained, and oh boy, talk about picking up the prairie. We sure did. I don't know how we ever got that. We really were plastered with mud by the time we got back from there. But of course, now they used to haul this with trucks, this crude. In fact, there was 44 trucks went by here twice a day on this Highway 12 here, before they got this line now that runs into Billings. It pumps out I think Jim Cooley and all those fields over there. And out west there's a few wells too, out in the Lake Mason area. And they funnel it down there through the pipeline, so we don't have that traffic here now. Although they do haul some out yet. But it's strange how quickly it changes the mode of transportation for that. Of course, probably a lot cheaper just to pipe it than to run these trucks, that many.
Well, what about agriculture? How important has agriculture been to Roundup?
Well, agriculture is really the background. Not really agriculture, the grazing, the cattle business, and the sheep business. They're really why we're here, I guess, in the first place. See, Muscle Shell down below here was the end of the Texas Trail, They used to trail them up here and turn them loose on this grass that cures just like hay, and they can winter on it, You don't have to. And it's tall, and it's really nutritious. So we just took over from Muscle Shell as being a cattle town. They used to ship a lot of cattle from here until they got the big trucks rolling, and that was probably one of the reasons the railroad quit running, because they weren't weren't carrying the freight, the cattle.
Well, after, in later years, in the 40s and 50s, 60s, up till today, is cattle still
Oh yeah,
important to the town?
yeah. And when they get rain, why, the grain farming is good. Of course, the hay and on the river bottom is a big item too. But it's, I don't know, they call it the miracle of Musselshell, and I guess it's a miracle it's still here. In 1958, we had our 50th anniversary, and we had a big play called The Miracle of the Musselshell. An old college prof of mine came down. He was at Bozeman, then he went to Missoula. His name was Hanson. And he came down and put it on. And he's quite a guy. He really did a good job. In fact, there's some books around someplace yet, I think, of the play. Miracle of the Musselshell.
Did he get the community involved in it?
Oh yeah, everybody was in it. It was the coldest damn day you ever saw, 4th of July. Jesus, I thought it was going to snow. It was blowing and everybody had their overcoats on. My brother-in-law was here from Butte and he was running around trying to buy a hot whiskey and nobody had their hot water on. So he had a hard time, but it turned out to be a really good celebration though.
You mentioned something earlier about this 4th of July celebration. Is that a traditional event that brings the community together?
Oh yeah, the Days of 49 they call it. And they've been having it right along. They have a big rodeo. It isn't as great as it used to be. Of course, when the miners were here, why, they was really big, you know. They had down at the fairgrounds, they'd have everything going. They even had nail pounding contests for ladies and egg on a spoon, you know, and they'd run with it. Oh God, all kinds of stuff. And tugs of war, just a real old-fashioned brawl, you know. It was really good. Remember, there was a gal called Minnie Mahoney, and boy, she could drive a nail. Better name man I ever saw. Wow. Yeah, it was.
Well, did Roundup have any other events during the year which brought a lot of people out or brought people together?
Oh gosh, that was the main thing. Of course, we used to have a baseball team, you know. Real good town team, you know. Since they started all this league stuff, now they've killed the small towns. It used to be every town had its team, you know. We had a real good team called the Roundup Miners. And that used to draw a lot of people, you know. They played every Sunday. And it was really good. Oh, and then of course, they'd have special things like the Bobby Burns dance or something like that. You know, that was a big thing. Out to Klein, they usually had it out there. And there were a lot of these people from England and Scotland, you know. And this Bobby Burns thing was a big thing. Of course, everybody went, all the Slavs and everybody else we had around, you know. Went to it, and it was really good. Oh, gosh, I don't know what else we had.
Well,
Of course, we had the rodeos. They always drew a lot of people.
were there, I guess the Scots put on the Bobby Burns Day. Did some of these other ethnic groups, like the Italians or the Slavs?
Well, they all went to the Bobby Burns. It was a strange thing. But I don't know why the Scots dominated it, especially. They weren't the most numerous. There was more Austrians and Slavs by far than the Bobby Burnsers, but I guess they were more enthusiastic or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I was wondering if the other groups had special dances or festivities.
Not really, I don't think. I can't recall that they did. Not, no big bash. They might have little family kind of local deals going. But they didn't. Then they had American Legion was big here, and they had a great band. In fact, they won the state championship, I don't know, 3 or 4 times. A marching band. And that was, the Legion was a big thing. There was a lot of these miners, they'd say, oh, they're just common miners, but God, some of them were talented people. They could play any kind of a musical instrument they picked up. And there were quite a few of them. It was just surprising.
Well, how long have you been mayor?
Oh, gee, I don't know. I started on the council in '55. And let's see. I don't remember now. Let's see. I got the job by default, I think. I think the mayor, who was the, I don't even remember who, can't think of who it was now. I think it was Herschel Robbins, and he went to the legislature and then left the job open. So I was the president of the council, so I inherited it. And I've inherited it ever since. That was when it was a 2-year term. And then after, I think I had a couple of 2-year terms, and then we went into the 4-year. 4 years is a long time, I don't know. But I really guess it's better. You can get your programs. In 2 years, you barely get them started. And then unless you get reelected, why, they might go out the window. But now we've been real good. We got a water tank, we got a golf course, we got a park. Once you get a grant, for years we couldn't get a grant. No, we'd go for a grant. Say, well, what do you mean coming for a grant? You don't owe any money. It was a crime. It's a crime to be in the black. I wouldn't stand for any other kind of operation, because I think government should operate just like a business. They don't spend more money than you have to spend, or tax people when you don't have to. So anyway, we almost lost that water tank grant, though. We had it all lined up, ready to go, and was approved and everything. And by golly, if they didn't, Farm Home didn't get word from Washington or something to cancel it. So it's a good thing to have friends in high places. So I called Senator Melcher. I said, John, that deal we got, that grant for that water tower is we're going to lose it. Water tank. He says, how's that? Well, I says, well, it was supposed to clear Bozeman. They're supposed to be over here to get that thing straightened out. I said, it's dead over there now. So, boy, he says, I'll see about that. So, boy, he called him up. Boy, they were over here in 2 days, and we got that thing squared off. Oh, man. But, we'd lost that thing. But if you just know where to go. Of course, my son works for Melcher. He's been his aide for several years. So it helps to have somebody where you can, get the word through. The thing about this government stuff, it's so much red tape that you can't get them to move on it. And by the time they do, it's gone. Yeah, I've been kicking around this politics a long time.
Well, what prompted you to run for the council back in '55?
Well, that was, I kind of inherited that too. My neighbor down the block here, Jim Weir, was laid up. He had, I don't know, I forget what he had. He was a diabetic, and I believe he had a leg removed or something, and he couldn't make it. So he called me down there one day, and he asked me if I'd do that, and I said, well, I guess I could do it. No big problem, is there? He says, no, anybody can do it. So I got on the cat. It was 1955. I'm still there. I think they're getting kind of tired of me. Maybe they'll kick me out this time. But
Well, what were some of the problems the council had to deal with back in the 50s? Do you remember anything, any issues or?
oh, we've always had problems with streets. You know, getting pavement, and of course our water problem. We've always had that till we got this new tank now. And then we have the sewage problem. You always have that. You know, to get enough money. See, you're strapped at 65 mils, you know. You can't do anything, and you can operate with 65 mils, and that's about all. But, you know, when we had this revenue sharing, why, we could put it some aside right along, you know, for, like, do 3 or 4 blocks a year. And that way, why, we've pretty well got the town covered, and we don't owe any money. Now, a lot of other towns now, they've used their revenue sharing money to pay people. We pay their, you know, help. Can't do that if you want to, because it's gone now practically. You know, used to get a nice cut of it. Now it's down to trickle, and so now they're really hurting. I don't know what you can do, but we just been tough enough to sit on it, you know, and not use it for the easy way there. And we've tried to give our people a little raise, but not beyond what we could afford, you know, that is out of our taxable valuation deal. So, anyway.
Well, how many employees does the city have?
Well, the city we have a Commissioner of Public Works, we have a city attorney, we have a city treasurer, have a city clerk, and we have a water clerk, and we have another gal that works in the office, and then we have under the Commissioner of Public Works, there's about, there must be 4 or 5 people, you know, like on the garbage truck, and we have a guy out to the landfill, and that's another problem, that landfill thing. You know, disposable waste thing. That's a headache all the time. And then, let's see. Well, I guess there's about 4 or 5 people under the, maybe 6. See, the golf course, the golf club couldn't get a grant, see. Had to go through the city, so we got the grant. Couldn't get any other kind of a grant that time, so we took the golf course. Jesus. But anyway, made a lot of people happy and some unhappy. But anyway, we took it and got it from the Parks and Recreation. And I think there may be one person out there that, like the guy that takes care of the irrigation and that sort of thing. They have an underground system there. But it's been a great thing. See, people come from Billings, they fly in here to play golf out there. It's really been, and then a lot of our people are using it.
Well, who writes these grants? Do you do most of that work? Or?
Oh, I don't. I've had a lot of experience with grant writing because I was with the, let's see, RHI, that Rural Health Initiative thing, you know, where you look for doctors for this county and for Golden Valley and for Wheatland and for White Sulphur Springs. And then I was on that HRDC, Human Development Resource Council, for 10 years. So I got up against that grant writing stuff pretty good. It's not a great trick to write a grant. You know, they have books that show you how to do it, and they'll send you the stuff and tell you how to do it. But they have to be written just right, And they have to, you have to, it seems like you have to know somebody someplace that can give it a boost. But anyway, we do have we got this program now for, renovating these low-income houses, you know. And Monty Seeley's I forgot to mention him, he's our building inspector, so he's taken over that job. And it's really been quite a program. But we'll have to wait for about 10 years to assess it, I guess, to see if these people a lot of these people, you know, well, I don't think they'll really appreciate what they've done for their property, you know, and it'll go to seed after a while. But they've really upgraded it, and it's really helped the town a lot. And
well, how much of your time do you devote to your work as mayor?
oh, we only meet twice a month on the first and third Tuesdays, and then it depends on the first. Usually, the first meeting is quite lengthy because we have the bills, you know, and any new business, anything that's pertinent comes up. But then I drop by the office and pick up my mail, and every few days, or if I'm always around, so if they have something they need signed, or they just come bring the papers, or I go down, they call me up and I go down there. Or the city attorney has a resolution, why I just go over and sign it, or else he brings it to the council. It's I don't know hour-wise how you'd say it, but I'm just around when they need me.
Well, you mentioned some of your accomplishments, like the water and
Oh yeah.
paving streets and so on. Have there been some priorities of your administration which you haven't been able to fulfill that you've wanted to?
Well, our sewage system is one that we haven't quite got to. Because we haven't had the funds, and of course, some of it could be accomplished with the SID district, see, but people, it goes on their taxes, you know, and a lot of them, it's hard to get people to sign up. Another accomplishment we got was this piece of land. We got 8.5 acres from the railroad over here, right adjacent to our other park, which was really a good thing, because the railroad was defunct, and we thought we were going to be out of luck. Didn't know how we were going to get it, but we finally went through Chicago, and by golly, somewhere or another they got I don't know how they got it, but they're the bankrupt, whatever they call it, the committee, or they have a certain receivers. Yeah, that's what they were in, receiverships. But anyway, they sold it to us for $8,000, I think, or $8,500, which was a steal. But we've had pretty good dealings with the railroad. They've really been, you know, they never did charge us exorbitantly for the land that we needed.
Well, what have been some of the big controversies in town in your years with the council and mayor? Has there been anything that divided the town? Or there's always something that makes people mad.
Oh yeah, we had a sewer district for the flat, and they couldn't pay off their SID, so we have a reserve, of course, and it had to come out of there, and then of course everybody has to pay into it. So some people weren't too happy about that. But really, to have a big hullabaloo, can't think of anything. We've tried not to rock the boat too much. I suppose there are some things that I didn't consider very important that would.
Just from reading around the paper,
You mean page 2 or whatever they call it?
Oh, the editor.
Well, that guy's picked up his pencil and thought he was a journalist.
Well, I'm thinking about the stock growers.
Oh, well, that's
Boycott or their threatened boycott.
yeah, that's on account of the school levy. You know, they don't want them to build $1 million, $2 million school, and they don't want that tax. But that's just, there's a bunch of young fellas got a hold of that, stock growers, and that's what they don't really, I don't think they appreciate what they're doing, but they, of course, I don't blame them for wanting their tax base further eroded there. It's just, it is a tough thing. And we spend lots of money for education, you know, our biggest slice out of our tax dollars for that. And they're never satisfied, you know, never. It's not a very good, but it's good old United States, you know. So
Who's never satisfied? The parents or stock growers?
nobody's satisfied. I mean, no matter what side you're on, there's another side to the coin, see? That's what I found out. And so you gotta maybe look at both sides and see if you can't see their point of view too. Because sometimes they both have merit. And sometimes you can compromise. Yeah, that's compromising thing is the greatest thing there is, you know.
Well, how has the city gotten along with the county? I noticed in that you've got a county-wide garbage plan.
Yeah, we have the city has the garbage deal, but the county pays now for the county people to use it. See, I forget 5,000, 10,000 maybe. But now they're trying to create a garbage district, see, for the people out in the county. Of course, the city already has it, so we don't need it, but they're trying it like the hospital, you know. We have a hospital district, you know, where you have a check off so much tax, 2 meals or something to support the hospital. The poor hospital would flounder if it weren't for that. They only have an average of 2 or 3 patients, you know. If it weren't for the rest home, the nursing home, why, it's full all the time.
Now, the days when your mother had the hospital, it was full all the time.
Yeah, most of the time, yeah. But of course we operated. My mother worked, my wife worked, and people, you didn't have to pay people that are, you know, that big amount of money now. In fact, I had a rest home there for 10 years, you know, nursing home. After when my mother had a stroke, and so we just kept her. Instead of the hospital, we just turned it into a nursing home. So we had 24 people. We just kept the people, and so we kept her there for 8 years, I guess. She was bedfast, and so it was a good thing. We just kept her. She was happy. We were happy with the arrangement. It wasn't a money maker because most of the people were on Medicaid or Medicare, and they paid you about $6 a day. One time they wanted to raise me 5 cents a day. Jesus, I said, you guys are crazy. I'm doing this for fun now. So my mother got pneumonia, and she went to the hospital. She finally passed away. But anyway, then they raised this minimum wage, you know. I had 10 people working, and so, gee, I got so I was losing about $1,000 a month, you know, taking it out of the drugstore. After a few months, I decided I couldn't stand too much of that, so we dispersed the people. Some of them went to Helena and Lewistown, and so we just locked it up.
This was back in the 50s?
74, we quit. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, well, I gotta go.